Hello and welcome to the second of the two hormonal control of reproduction videos. This one is about the female, hopefully you can tell by the board. In exactly the same way as the male, hormonal control is started off by the hypothalamus in the brain, releasing release a hormone which acts on the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland then goes on to release various hormones. Now this is all going to become a bit messy in terms of lines and explanations, so what I need for you to do is rewind the video if you're losing track, go back over what I said about each of the two things. But before we get into the hormonal side of things, just want to explain what's represented by the board here. So along the bottom we have the day 1, day 14 and day 28 marked out. The first 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle is called the follicular phase, and in the ovaries we can see the follicle developing, getting bigger as the time goes on, until eventually we get to day 14, at which point ovulation takes place. Now what's left after ovulation takes place in the ovary is the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum slowly but surely degrades and degenerates down to nothing by the end of day 28, and we call that the luteal phase. All the while this is going on, we have the endometrium, which is the lining of the womb, becoming thickening and becoming thicker and thicker and thicker. So it thickens throughout the first phase, the follicular phase, and then its thickness is maintained for the majority of the luteal phase, right up until the end, at the point where the corpus luteum eventually disappears. It triggers menstruation, and the lining of the womb exits the body. So that's the situation we're in. What we need to start to understand is hormonally why this is happening. So very, very quickly, pituitary gland is triggered by the release of hormone, first of all to release FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, very appropriately named because that's what it does. It will generate, it will trigger the formation and the maturation of the follicle. While that is happening, while the follicle is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, it makes more and more and more of the hormone estrogen. Estrogen has the effect on the endometrium that thickens it, so as more and more estrogen builds up, it will thicken the endometrium to its maximum point, and eventually once estrogen has reached a sufficient level in the body, it then acts on the pituitary gland to release LH, and keep LH and ovulation connected in your brain. They're two very, very closely related. Ovulation is triggered by LH, but LH isn't released until estrogen has reached sufficient levels. So it starts off its FSH, estrogen builds up, thickening the endometrium as it does so, and then eventually when it's reached a maximum level, it causes enough of an influence on the pituitary gland to release LH and trigger ovulation, and that's the follicular phase hormonally, right? The next phase is called the luteal phase, where what's left, because ovulation's taking place, there's no follicle, there's no egg left there anymore, the egg's exited. So what's left behind is something called the corpus luteum. And throughout the luteal phase, it slowly but surely degenerates to nothing, all the while releasing both estrogen and progesterone. Now, estrogen and progesterone have a negative effect on the pituitary gland, so they're preventing any further FSH release. What that means is that during the luteal phase, the production of another follicle is inhibited, and that's very important because you don't want a new follicle starting to form until the ovary is empty. Estrogen and progesterone also work to maintain the thickness of the endometrium. So throughout the luteal phase, the endometrium stays thick. But however, as the corpus luteum gets smaller and smaller and smaller and eventually disappears, its influence on both the endometrium and its negative effect on the pituitary gland both get lost, and what happens is FSH is switched back on again and menstruation takes place, and we go back effectively to day 1, and that is the menstrual cycle explained hormonally. Please, that was a lot of information. Do go back rewind each stage. Consider the whole thing as being a follicular phase, ovulation being right in the middle of the cycle, and then the luteal phase after that. Remember, it's estrogen here, estrogen and progesterone there. Remember LH and ovulation. Remember when you're talking about the endometrium that it's thickened during the follicular phase and then maintained during the luteal phase. Menstruation is the sign that we've come to the end of the cycle. Yes, I think that'll do it.